Wow, that was really interesting. But I'm really curious about how you collect and document your evidence. Like, what do you do when you start having more questions based on the evidence that you have?
Well, we collect, to answer the first part of your question, it really depends on what it is that we have for evidence. Quite frankly, it could be you telling me about something you saw. So that's, testimonial evidence, which may be tape recorded and then transcribed into written documents, which is typically always what the end result is some form of written, documentation of statements and whatnot. Sometimes the evidence could be, with our work, it could be a short trout, quite frankly, or an illegal deer, or an ATV that was involved in a crime, or there's a whole host of things, that could be evidence for us. It could be videotapes of surveillance on someone's private property of illegal activity. So it comes in many, many forms, more varieties now probably than ever in the history of police work. So we have people specially trained in the warden service at a high level who are responsible for the proper collection of that evidence and storage of that evidence. Now, what was the other part of your
So when you
question?
do you actually have people on staff that take pictures like when you go to a
Yeah,
scene
yeah,
and or do you just like pull out your camera, your phone and take pictures?
that's a good question. It depends on what it is. If it's something more routine, quite frankly, the game wardens just take the photos of the evidence with their own computers and document it that way. If it's more high profile, and much more um, critical in nature, we do have people specifically trained and on teams to come in and take photographs. Now, something that would be an example would be a hunting related shooting incident. Someone gets shot and killed during hunting season by a hunter. We are trained at a level like, and some of our people receive homicide training. And so that we actually investigate those incidents just like a homicide, until we prove otherwise, that maybe this is purely an incident that there was no intent to kill somebody. But quite frankly, over the years, there's probably been some that someone intentionally tried to kill someone and they covered it up as a hunting incident. So we're always on the lookout for that. Now,
So say you start off with an investigation that seems like it was an accident, but as you start gathering more evidence, it leads to more questions.
yeah, yeah,
So how do you handle, do you go and gather more evidence? Do you
yeah,
what do you do for those situations?
yeah. And like we had talked about earlier, you know, especially with a hunting related shooting incident or any fatal incident, the stakes are a little bit different. Obviously, someone's lost their life. So a lot of interviews take place, a lot of evidence analysis takes place, skid marks on the road, maybe during a crash, or evidence debris from maybe a boating fatality, where all the evidence sinks to the bottom of the lake. There's a whole host of, evidence and things that come into play there. But depending on what we find out from maybe some obscure, piece of evidence that we found, why is this over here? Or what could have caused this piece of evidence to drift way down there? Or talking to someone in particular, maybe they clue us into something that we hadn't even considered. So it may force us to talk to someone else that, might be able to corroborate that evidence or eliminate that suspicion. So it really is a very interesting network and web of information that we need to track down and try to best determine, what is the most reasonable, what is the most credible, and what basically trying to solve this incident in reverse, having not seen it with our own eyes. And
So
that whole process is very, very interesting.
how many people do you have on your team? Like, do you have like scuba divers, or do you call other agencies? Or how much of it do you actually do yourselves as wardens?
Yeah, almost all of it we do ourselves. We are statutorily, by law, responsible for investigating some of these things that we're talking about. So we have to be ready to do that, and we are trained to a high level to do that. So yes, we do have divers that, if there's a boating fatality on, Big Sebago or wherever, our divers go down and secure evidence and bring it to the surface. It gets documented and plotted on the lake floor where it was. So you basically draw a map of, a debris field, or maybe it's a body or whatever it is. We have canines that, can find evidence, pertaining to a variety of incidents. We have an air wing division, airplanes, where we can take aerial photographs and do those types of things. So yeah, we have people trained at different levels, that not only know how to manage and investigate some of those pieces of evidence, but we even have positions at the Warden Service that are case managers for those big cases. We have investigators that, should we have something like a two-party fatal snowmobile crash where there's likely to be prosecution, or a hunting related incident where someone dies, we have an investigator specifically assigned to do that and see that case through, so they can take the time needed to make sure that that's processed well.
That's interesting. So with all these different jobs and everything, and when you do an investigation, and you said it always ends up with some sort of written document. So do you collaborate, or what type of writing are you expected to do as a game warden when you do these investigations?
Yeah, it is. Writing skills are so important in police work. I know they are in warden work, because essentially everything that we investigate or do on a day-to-day basis gets documented somehow, some way. And, the way that we're trained is that, okay, the report you're going to be writing on this, Corporal McDonald, ultimately could be reviewed and seen by, a district attorney or a judge or the defense attorney, in this case. So we prepare each one of our reports in preparation for that. It may never come to that, but we want to make sure that all our bases are covered. Not only does the game warden or officer submit a report, someone like myself reviews the report, make sure that it's, structurally good and sound, and spelling is, just giving it a second look to make sure that it's appropriate to forward on. Do we collaborate on some of that? Yeah, we have several incidents that include, dozens of game wardens sometimes. So, it's not always possible for the human brain to capture and remember everything to do with a particular incident. So we may have to bounce questions off each other, like, what was that guy's name? Or what time did we clear? Or what time was the body recovered? Just to get us on the same page as best we can with timelines. But each individual officer has a different perspective and probably a different duty within that investigation. So mostly my job in it would be to document what my efforts were during a particular case. Maybe it's as a supervisor, or maybe it's as a primary investigator, or whatever it might be. So there's a fair amount of collaboration that takes place, and scrutiny for our reports to make sure that they're very well written.
So you said that your writing is super important, especially to pass it on, because different people might see it. So
Right.
how does the audience and the purpose for the report, how does that affect like how you write it, and what sort of checks and balances are done with your writing, your own writing, when you're starting to write a report that could be in court, or could
Yep.
be in the newspaper?
Right. Well, that's an excellent question, because doing an investigation report is, that writing style is much different than it would be if you knew it was going to go directly to the news, for instance. Now, I've had in my capacity the ability or the opportunity to have to do both.
Mm.
So I've been, a game warden. This is my 23rd year as a game warden. So I've been through a fair amount of investigations where I have to write a report based on catching a night hunter or whatever example you can think of, that has to be tailored towards the absolute facts, which in some cases are very black and white and very honest, uncensored, so to speak. You're not writing it in the sense that you're giving it to the victim's family. So it has to be very open, honest, factual, and transparent. Now, if I'm writing, my capacity currently is public information officer for the Warden Service. So occasionally it's my job to disseminate, incidents that game wardens have investigated to the media. And more often than not, they just cut and paste my news release into, that's my goal at least, is that they do that. They cut and paste my words, so they're not putting words in my mouth. But when you do that, you have to be very, very aware of your audience, because you can't be super transparent with all the facts, especially related to the body or how it may be positioned or what may have led to the crash or whatever it might be, because you have the family to contend to who's reading this perhaps for the first time about their loved one. Or maybe it's a criminal prosecution case where no one has died, but you don't want to reveal all the evidence related to the case on purpose. You don't want to, at least give the appearance that they're guilty before they're convicted. You just have to be very factual about it. So knowing who your audience is, for my position in particular, is very, very important. That's in my training for this job. That was probably my number one priority, is understanding who my audience is going to be, and making sure that what's given to the media is factual but palatable for all audiences.